Hello everyone, my name is Guna Spurava and I am researcher at University of Turku. And in this lecture I will explain how the rise of large online platforms such as social media and search engines has reshaped the production, distribution and visibility of science-related content. Let's start with how the overall information environment has changed. For a very long time, legacy media, such as newspapers, television broadcasters, radio, were primary gatekeepers of public information, including science-related content. They followed established editorial rules, ethical guidelines for journalists, and verification routines, which meant that science-related stories were reviewed, contextualized, and checked before they reached broader public. But this situation has changed significantly. Digitalization and development of information and communication technologies have provided a foundation to the rise of these new digital platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, X, and Google Search. These platforms, owned by a small number of global technology companies, have become dominant source of information, including science information, for millions, if not billions of people. They define the visibility and accessibility of information globally. And these platforms define how every one of us access information and how we are interacting with this information. A key challenge in this regard is that these platforms operate beyond media policies. They operate beyond European regulatory frameworks. And regulating these platforms is a very complicated task because these platforms are non-transparent in their operations. Their business procedures are different from legacy companies, so media regulators who usually used to be involved in regulating and setting rules for traditional media companies are in a situation where they are beginners, where they learn how to do this thing. What it means for scientific information, this regulatory gap has real consequences there because the absence of moderation mechanisms means that a big amount of misinformation and oversimplified or sensational science-related content, including misleading narratives about health, climate, or new technologies, circulate unchecked. This directly shapes people's perception of reality, their decisions, and can affect their overall well-being. One of the most important reasons why it happens in this way is related to platform business model and their underlying logic, how they operate in advertising market. As you have heard possibly, platforms operate within so-called attention economy. What it means, attention economy? Attention economy means situation where in times of information overload, users' attention, each of us attention is limited, and it is valued as a very, very important resource in media business. Who is reaching this attention, more attention from media users is a winner in advertising market. Platforms are great competitors in this advertising market, and they compete with sophisticated technologies here, artificial intelligence-based technologies, which allows them to collect a significant amount of user data about their behavior, interactions, location, media consumption, platform consumption, and based on these data and using advanced analytical approaches, platforms algorithmically adjust content to user interests, and this keeps users engaged with platforms more and more. Previous research shows that people engage more with emotionally charged content, also with negative or sensational posts, which spread much faster than information which is with a more clear scientific explanation. And this is the way how scientific information usually is not circulated. Scientific information requires contextual knowledge. Scientific information demands detailed explanations to develop good understanding about context, and these characteristics didn't fit in this platform-driven environment. This platform-driven environment, as I mentioned before, is created to primarily get users involved more and more with their content. Algorithmic content recommender systems are the ones that are in the core in this center. So let's talk a little bit more about algorithmic content recommender systems, because play so crucial role in shaping how scientific information reaches people today. Their main goal, as I mentioned before, is straightforward: to serve platform business goals. And the way these systems operate as a gatekeeper today is based on these algorithmic operations. It is completely different as it used to be done by journalists. As I mentioned before, journalistic content went through very careful verification, through very careful editorial decisions before they reached audience. Today, when everyone can be content creator, and when platforms doesn't have responsibility about content quality, algorithms amplify this content in very high speed. This content which is not verified, which is not qualitative, reaches audience much quicker than it was possible in times when content was completely governed by legacy media. Another major issue is opacity of these systems. Users often have no understanding of how certain information is reaching their posts. They only can see the end result. They don't know precisely how their behavior is tracked and what data are collected. They don't know how data are analyzed, and they also don't know precisely what kind of criteria content is ranked what they receive. As a result, they have no way of knowing why also certain science-related information reached their timelines. And they don't understand also what kind of content is not reaching their timelines. And this matters a lot, because what people don't see is just as important as what they do see. Algorithmic visibility and invisibility of scientific information shapes not only how people understand scientific issues, but also how they perceive reality, the decisions they make, and the actions they take in their everyday lives. Algorithms are programmed to show users information that aligns with their existing interests. And this narrows significantly information field reached by them and limits opportunities of them to encounter with alternative views. We know from previous research, and you will find several of these studies in your reading list, we know from this research that over the time this selective exposure contributes to polarization, including in how people understand and interpret scientific information, and that affects their everyday lives. By repeatedly reinforcing users' pre-existing views on topics such as vaccines, climate change, nutrition, or new technologies, algorithms gradually separate audience into groups that no longer share a common understanding of basic scientific facts that play a significant role in their well-being. And this means that science communicators, including journalists, cannot fully control where and how their messages appear, because a lot of journalistic content today is also continuing their life in social media platforms. Once scientific information enters in the contemporary information ecosystem, in this hybrid media ecosystem, its visibility is determined by algorithms and the platform companies that design and control these algorithms. These systems operate in ways that none of us can fully to influence, and we don't have a power to decide what becomes visible in our timelines. It is decided by platforms operating through algorithmic processes that are neither transparent and not accountable. One another important topic that we need to address in this context is about new content production practices. When legacy media defined what kind of scientific information reaches public, it was done by professionally educated journalists. Today, everyone has a reach to broad audience. And in this changed environment, it means that content which is not previously verified and checked, but created by users without editorial responsibility, without ethics, can reach every one of us. In this situation, not only regular users are making influence, but we know that in this environment, more and more significant role is played by so-called influencers, podcasters, YouTubers, TikTokers, and many others who have become important science communicators. And also these communicators who has really broad reach to millions of audience have no responsibility about any consequence of content what they are sharing. What it means for science communication, it means that a lot of simplified or sensational science narratives from influencer is reaching audience. And it means also that a large volume of questionable or even misleading content which comes not from experts can reach broader public. Some of these new communicators are very skilled about how to reach audience, and they are very well researched. They have financial support for disseminate their messages, and that makes them even more influential than traditional scientific institutions or traditional media spreading scientific information. In this context, when we can see that a lot of things are decided by platforms and by users who were not previously involved in content creation, it is very important that every one of us develop understanding about this environment. It is very important that every one of us is raising their awareness how platforms operate, how they function, what are their business models, how algorithmic content recommendation works in frame of these business models. But it is not easy because these platforms operate in non-transparent ways. This non-transparency creates a lot of challenges, not only decision makers, policy makers, and regulators, as I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture. It creates a lot of challenges also for us as users. Platform awareness, in my understanding, is something much more than understanding how platforms provide you a content. Platform awareness is comprehensive understanding about very complex interplay between social, technological, economic, and political aspects of platform power. It includes understanding about aspects that it makes influence of each of us, about our choice of information, about our decision making, about how platforms make impact on our privacy, about how platforms make influence on our connectivity, about quality of information, and about different aspects that is making impact on our lives. But it is also related to very complicated technological aspects. It is related to platform ability to be reprogrammed, because if platforms in one moment operate in one specific way, it doesn't mean that after a month they will operate in the same way. What is important for us to understand this transforming nature, that we are not able always to be completely aware how they operate technologically, but we need to be aware that they are changed constantly. We need to be aware that design, how platforms are designed, makes significant influence on us as users. It means that every our movement, our likes, our shares, the way how we communicate to each other, the way how we disseminate content makes an influence. We need to understand that data-related process and process analyzing these data are very significant. And we need to understand that this analytic provides platforms with very sophisticated information about our lives and about users, making them possible to adjust information that we are reaching there. We need to understand that invisibility of these processes is something that significantly makes impact on our life. We need to understand that all these processes are tightly related to their economical goals. These platforms operate, as I mentioned before, in the frame of attention economy. And all technological tools used in these platforms, all our information, all our data is a part of platform operations within this attention economy. All these processes taken together makes a significant societal and political impact. It makes an impact on democracy. It makes an impact on democracy in the way how society today is polarized. It makes impact on democracy in the way how our opinions are impacted. It makes impact on democracy because of non-transparency, because of lack of regulation. There are a lot of aspects taken together that we need to consider when we are thinking about platforms and their impact on our life.